What's up, y'all? It's Loco, and today we're gonna be talking about the Raikage versus the Sannin. I got my boy Lightning Snow with me today. Tell him what's up.
What's going on, y'all? Back here for a video. Glad to be on the channel. Thank you for having me.
Me and Lightning Snow have actually done a bunch of collabs on his channel, so I'd go check that out as well. Of course, I've been repping my boy Sasuke over there, so if you're interested in that, go check out his channel, of course. But today, we're talking about the Raikage versus Sannin, like I already mentioned. This is actually a very interesting matchup. I know a lot of people might sway either way. They might just say the Raikage has overwhelming speed that the Sannin just can't keep up with, or the Sannin are just like in another tier of their own and they just slam the Gokage or whatever. But I actually have a pretty moderate take when it comes to this topic, and I've just been so excited to talk about it.
I agree. I think the Raikage is a little bit underrated. I don't think he gets enough. And that might be because like he has a lack of versatility about him, which necessarily it's not necessarily a bad thing per se. Because when you have so much speed and strength, you don't really need a whole lot of versatility. But when you go up against people like the Sannin, who themselves have respective versatility in their abilities, it does help when it comes to certain enemies like the Raikage. So I think that's where most people do kind of sleep on the Raikage, because he doesn't do much aside from speed blitz people. So but no, I'm interested to rep our boy the Raikage too, because I think he's definitely slept on.
Bro, the Raikage is insanely downplayed. Like, he's, in my opinion, he's just like a less flashy version of like Might Guy. Like, everyone hypes him up because they see him doing like these around the back kicks and shit, like dynamic entry, hitting Kisame right in his jaw. But the Raikage is such an OG when it comes. He's literally like a WWE wrestler inside the Naruto verse. Like, he's going crazy, picking Sasuke up, slamming him on his head. He's just so cool, and that's why like I said, I'm excited to talk about this. But of course, we're not talking about the Raikage versus the Sannin as a group. That would be kind of unfair. We're talking about the Raikage versus each Sannin individually. So first, we're going to be starting off with Jiraiya, then moving on to Orochimaru, and then Tsunade, and seeing how the Raikage would stack up to each of them. But first, I think we should scale exactly where the Raikage and the Sannin are in terms of like strength and speed. So I don't think it's very contentious when I say that the Raikage is faster than any of the Sannin. I hope people don't get mad at me for saying that. That's definitely not like a hot take or anything, but he just has shown like superiority to them in speed and arguably strength, if you're not considering like Hunter Healing Tsunade or Sage Jiraiya. Like, against the base Sannin, he should be stronger and faster than them definitively. It's not like the Sannin are actually going to be like perception blitzed by the Raikage. That's like a common misconception that some people tend to have in the community. Basically, my scaling for the Sannin as a whole would be that Hiruzen is actually stated to be like the pinnacle of the shinobi world. He's stated to be the strongest out of the Gokage when he's alive. These aren't necessarily just hyperbolic statements either, because they come in like all types of shapes and fashions, right? They're just calling Hiruzen and the Sannin as well. They're just saying that they scale to the Gokage. They're on par with these high level shinobi. So if that's the case, we know that Orochimaru was basically on par with Hiruzen during their fight. It's actually stated that the two shinobi were equally matched, and we see him swapping hands and crossing blades with Hiruzen for a short period of time, just once again implying relativity between Hiruzen and Orochimaru, and of course by extension the Sannin, who are stated to be relative to each other. So if Hiruzen is above the Gokage, right, and the Sannin have several statements scaling them above the Gokage as well, then that would mean they cannot be like perception blitzed by the Raikage. They at least have to be able to react to the Raikage's tier of speed. Which once again, the Raikage is not just going to be running circles around them. They won't be able to keep up. That's not actually what's going to happen during this fight. So just right off the bat, the Sannin would be able to keep up with the Raikage's movements, is basically what I'm trying to say.
I brought this up to Loco before we start recording, is that each of these Sannin, from my perspective anyway, have not really combated anybody as fast as the Raikage. So at least not that we've seen. Now, to be fair, like they may have some fights that we just don't know about, that they could have fought someone that's either near the Raikage speed or on the Raikage's level of speed. We just don't know. But even if that was the case, we can't definitively say how they'd be able to respond to people as fast as the Raikage, because we've never seen that before. So in these scenarios, we have to kind of play on this, under the assumption like that they would be reacting to somebody as fast as the Raikage. And as Loco said, like I said, I don't know. It's really weird to scale these people as far as like how they would deal with someone as fast as, because I mean, again, you know, Orochimaru was a candidate to be the fourth Hokage in compared to Minato, but we have statements from part one, specifically from like people like Anko, who was talking to the third Hokage about like how I wish the fourth Hokage was still alive, implying that if Minato was alive, he would have easily dealt with Orochimaru, which we kind of already know that, but that is implied from his speed, like how fast he is. Obviously, has something to do with that statement.
Yeah.
So it really is like tough for the Sannin respectively to deal with somebody who's as fast as the Raikage.
And that's not like the only time when Minato is just heavily implied and outright stated to be above the Sannin and Hiruzen, right? Like all the way back in part 1 when Jiraiya was first seeking out Tsunade, he was talking to her in Naruto and he was like, everyone pales in comparison to Lord Fourth. He was like he had unparalleled talent. He was like one of the greatest shinobi ever. He was just like wanking Minato, to be honest. And like
Yeah,
he's saying that while he's standing in front of Tsunade, so he's talking about himself as well. So it's like we know the statement from Anko when she's like, "Damn, if only Minato, the fourth Hokage, were around, he would low diff Orochimaru." And she's like standing right in front of Hiruzen, and he kind of gets like pissed
yeah,
off. He's like, "Don't say such things, Anko." So it's like Minato, who is just above the Sannin, the Raikage kind of has scaling to Minato, right? I know a lot of people kind of get triggered whenever you bring up like the Raikage being not inferior to Minato in speed, as the data books just outright state, but it is true, right? We've seen this happen on like multiple occasions. They both scale to KCM1 Naruto. Actually, in just his version 1 state, the Raikage was kind of piecing up KCM1 Naruto until he got his mental amper, decided to go all out depending on your interpretation. And that's kind of just where Minato would scale in terms of his flying rising activation. So when it comes to the not inferior statement, my interpretation, and I believe this is the most likely one, is that the speed at which Minato can activate his FTG would be about the same speed as like the Raikage running around the battlefield and like punching things or whatever. So if that's the case, then once again the Raikage is insanely fast. Obviously, when I say FTG activation, I'm not talking about like the actual teleportation itself. It's the speed at which Minato can turn on FTG and then go somewhere else, you know. But that once again, this is great scaling for the Raikage. He definitely should not be downplayed. I know a lot of people try to use a lot of statements from the Raikage to downplay him, especially when he says there has been no shinobi faster than me since the fourth Hokage died. This is kind of a misinterpretation, but I will be addressing this in a future video. I'm not going to be explaining my arguments here. I'm going to be kind of gatekeeping them for right now, so be sure to look out for that. But basically, do not downplay the Raikage in this fight, but also don't downplay the Sannin. They can still react to the Raikage, even though he's insanely fast.
yeah, for sure. And just as a a last bit of scaling, there are statements that gets thrown around Naruto. Like Naruto, the series is notorious for throwing out statements that get retconned earlier. And now I'm not saying this is a retcon, what I'm about to say, but it is something that shouldn't be dismissed. When in the flashback that is shown whenever Minato fought the Raikage in the past, it is stated whenever the Raikage is like, oh, Minato can counter me in my top speed. It is a younger Raikage that's addressing this Minato, so it's one of those things where like people get stronger all the time as they age, and so I mean there's a good chance that by the time before the war comes around, that the Raikage's speed has gotten even better since then. So I mean the Raikage seems like one of those guys that just never stops training, to be perfectly honest. So I wouldn't think that he wouldn't be faster by this point. So there's a good argument that you could say that the Raikage could be like specifically on point with Minato. You never know. So now obviously I'm not saying that as a 100% guarantee, because I'm still on the side of Minato still faster, but it is one of those statements that you need to just keep in mind whenever you're talking about this kind of stuff.
Especially because we know that the Raikage like consistently trains. Like the first time we actually see him on screen is him like lifting weights, so it's just consistent that he gets stronger. Especially because the third Great Shinobi War was about 20 years before Shippuden, right? Obviously, we know Naruto is like 16 years old, and then like I guess you can assume a few years happened between the Third Great Shinobi War and the time of Minato's death. So I mean, it's close to 20 years. I mean, if you don't think the man's gonna get stronger after 20 years of lifting weights, I mean, I don't got anything else to say to you.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I think enough beating around the bush. We can actually get into this matchup now. Like I said, we're gonna be starting off with our boy Jiraiya. Honestly, I don't know what Jiraiya is doing in base. Like for any of those out here that are thinking that Jiraiya just solos the Raikage in base, like you got another thing coming. I think my best scaling for this would be like all the way back in the Pain arc. We know that Naruto, as soon as he arrives on the battlefield, is just stated to have surpassed his predecessors, which refers to Minato and Jiraiya. And a lot of people might counter this by saying that, oh, they were only referring to Naruto's like experience with like Sage Jutsu. Like obviously Minato and Jiraiya aren't the best at that, but that's just blatantly not true, because right before that we see Naruto outspeed and one-shot the Ashura Path of Pain, and Tsunade, Fukasaku, and Gamabunta all witness this and come to the same conclusion, right? They witness Naruto basically performing a great strength and speed feat, and they're like, yeah, he's better than them, right? So if that's the case, like, you can disagree with the Minato thing if you like. I don't really care about that, but all that matters is that at this point in time, Sage Naruto is more impressive than Sage Jiraiya is, basically. And we know for a fact that KCM1 Naruto is stronger than Sage Naruto, because after he splits up his clones into like 12 other clones, and then he goes to fight Nagato, he looks at him and he says, I'm stronger now than when I fought Pain, right? And of course Naruto was in Sage mode when he fought Pain. He didn't have KCM1 back then, so that just directly proves that KCM1 Naruto is stronger than Sage Naruto, which the Raikage, like I've already established, kind of just scales to KCM1 Naruto in terms of speed at the very least. So Jiraiya definitely has like the worst scaling here. He's gonna have the hardest time against the Raikage, especially because he needs like a set amount of time before he can enter Sage mode. So if you are of the interpretation that Jiraiya cannot enter Sage mode before he kind of gets like body slammed by the Raikage, I would not blame you. Like I definitely think that that's a reasonable interpretation to have, but I think some things Jiraiya could do to solve for time is like summon Gamabunta and the other toads. Maybe he can set up combo attacks with them, like a Bath of Boiling Oil, or he could just use Dark Swamp to make it harder for the Raikage to travel across the battlefield. But he's gonna have a really hard time if he can't get into Sage mode quick enough. Like what do you think, Lightning?
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I said, obviously when this fight starts, it's starting in base, right? And I don't even think, I don't want to say this as like I'm sleeping on Jiraiya, but I don't even think that the Raikage needs his top speed to be able to blitz. I mean, I really, because like I said earlier, like we never see the Sannin fight someone as fast as the Raikage. We don't know how they would necessarily deal with someone who's that fast. So, and like you said, if we're taking the statement from Jiraiya in part 1, talking about how Minato is this one of a kind genius, and now I get it, it's all around genius. It's not, he's not specifically talking about his speed, but his speed is mostly what Minato is known for. So if Jiraiya is already considering Minato someone that could easily beat him, the Raikage's speed is going to be, like I said, at least relative to Minato. And yeah, like I just don't see base Jiraiya reacting to the Raikage, and I don't see him being able to. And even if the Raikage doesn't know about Sage mode, which is obviously likely, I don't see the Raikage just letting him gather any chakra, because I feel like he might pick up on what's happening. He's got his hands together and whatnot. He's like, yeah, I may not want to let him do whatever he's about to do, like whatever it is, and just speed blitz. But if we give Jiraiya some leeway and say somehow he is able to enter Sage mode, maybe he might have a chance to react to the Raikage's attempts to blitz him, like how Sage Naruto did in the War arc. But I still would give it to the Raikage more, just because it's an incomplete Sage mode. It's not really, obviously on par with Sage mode Naruto's, whether it's in the Pain arc or the War arc. So I don't know. It just doesn't look good for Jiraiya. Like you said, the best chances he has is if he summons enough toads where he can, combo The Dark Swamp thing definitely is a hindrance for the Raikage for 100%, certainty. But I don't know. I just don't think Jiraiya is gonna be quick enough to get any jutsus off before the Raikage blitzes him.
Now, I should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the Raikage scaling, but I totally forgot. But listen up, guys, because this is extremely important. It's heavily implied and outright stated that the Raikage is Bijou level when he's at his max power. This is just blatantly said by Karin during the 5 Kage Summit. Once he powers up to his version 2 state or his full power, she says that his chakra is at Bijou levels. This is also supported by the time when the Raikage, when he was significantly younger, like when his dad was still alive, he was chopping off the horns of the 8 tails, possibly like when he wasn't even at full power in his version 2 state. There's also a statement from the data books that says that the Raikage has the highest combat power out of anyone else in the village, and of course that would include B, who is a perfect Jinchuriki capable of forming Bijou bombs. So you could say that the attack potency of the Raikage is actually greater than that of one of B's like Bijou Damas. So we already know how someone like Jiraiya handled a significantly weaker Jinchuriki like Naruto. Like I don't want to be downplaying Jiraiya here, don't get me wrong, but he did kind of get fucked up by the 4 tails, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that is an imperfect 4 tails version 2 Jinchuriki, while the Raikage scales to an actual fucking Bijou. So
yeah,
once again, if the Raikage gets his hands on base Jiraiya at the very least, he might just fold him. Like in all honesty, he might just fold him. Right? Sage mode is a slightly different story because we know that your durability is increased in Sage mode, but this is kind of questionable for Jiraiya since it looks like he gets damaged by like a basic punch or like a very basic attack from the Ashura path, and his arm is ripped off. And once again, we know Sage Naruto was able to like completely destroy the Ashura path with a single Rasen Shuriken, and once again he's just stated to be like above Jiraiya at that point in time. And like it's just like the Raikage can output like so much more power than some of these characters can, right? He's incredibly strong, and I think the Lariat would just take him out entirely. Like the Lariat just blew up Sasuke's like entire chest cavity, and you could see his ribs. So it's like I'll talk more about the scaling for the Lariat later when it actually matters in the other fights. But I don't think, first of all, I don't think Jiraiya gets into Sage mode here. And even if you are charitable enough to get him into Sage mode, the only thing that the Raikage does not have a counter for, the only thing that his speed cannot account for, is the Frog Song. Which, once again, that is a great win con for Jiraiya. I'm not taking that away from him. But the Frog Song does require prep. Like Ma and Pa need to find the harmony in the song necessary in order to activate the Genjutsu in the first place, and that does take time. And if Jiraiya is already having trouble getting into Sage mode and he's having trouble getting Frog Song off, then it's really just more likely than not, like Lightning said, he's not going to win this one.
No, I totally agree. The tragedy that's befallen our boy Jiraiya here, but the Raikage is crazy.
And as for any of you that are bringing up the Toad summons, I did mention them earlier, but it is just heavily implied that Gamabunta does not scale to Jiraiya. Like the Sannin summons don't actually scale to them, because I mentioned this to Lightning Snow earlier. I was saying that Manda was actually submitting to Orochimaru during the 3-way deadlock because he was under the impression that Orochimaru still had his arms. And Kabuto says, like, if Manda realizes that Orochimaru cannot use his jutsu, then he'll try to rebel against him and kill him, basically. So this means that Manda is kind of like inferior to Orochimaru at full power, of course, but that would mean that Manda doesn't actually scale to the Sannin's tier of strength. Which would mean that the other summons like Katsuyu and Gamabunta, who scale to Manda, wouldn't actually scale to the Sannin either, which means that they wouldn't actually be able to. I mean, they would obviously be served as a distraction. Maybe Jiraiya can set up combo attacks with Gamabunta, like Gamakichi and the rest of them, but they won't actually be a win con for Jiraiya here, since first of all, they don't even scale to the Sannin, and second of all, they don't scale to the Bijou, which we've already proven that the Raikage scales to or above. So that's not even really a viable win con for Jiraiya or any of the Sannins. in these matchups.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree.
But enough of us like kind of shitting on Jiraiya. Let's move on to Orochimaru. And I think this one is a whole lot crazier because this man Orochimaru just does not die, bro. So I think the Raikage is going to have an incredibly hard time like even killing him in the first place. Like this dude has so many ways of like coming back from the Raikage's hits. First of all, he's insanely durable. But he also has that snake substitution thing where he can just spit out entirely new bodies that have sustained no damage. Like also he gets cut in half by Four Tails Naruto, and then he just reattaches himself back together with snakes. It's kind of insane. This man is a freak. But at the same time, I don't think Orochimaru actually has anything to damage the Raikage in his base form, at least. Let me make that clear. In his base form, Orochimaru doesn't really have anything to take on the Raikage. Like first things first, the Kusanagi blade was having a hard time piercing Four Tails Naruto, and we've already kind of established that the Raikage scales above actual Bijou, so the lightning cloak should likely be more durable than that version 2 Four Tails cloak that Naruto had on. So the Kusanagi blade wouldn't even pierce the lightning cloak in the first place. But Orochimaru's other jutsu are just kind of unknown. He does have the Edo Tensei. Of course, he could summon in Hashirama and Tobirama. Obviously, like they're weaker versions, of course. Like we're not gonna let this man Orochimaru have access to like almost full power Hashirama and Tobirama from the war. Like, that would be insanely overpowered. I should have mentioned we were talking about part 1 Orochimaru, but that's on me. But even those weaker Edo Tensei do scale kind of closer to the Sannin's tier because they were kind of like giving Hiruzen the hands. Obviously that version of Hiruzen was like mentally nerfed, and when he did actually have the resolve to take down his former like senseis, he sealed them pretty easily, but they'd still be a threat here. But I think that's being kind of credible to Orochimaru because he did require prep time. He needed like dead bodies in order to create the Edo Tensei in the first place. So if you want to give him the Edo Tensei, then I guess you can, but just that's kind of unfair because you're giving him prep time. But really, I don't see anything else that base Orochimaru would be able to do against like full power version 2 Raikage.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I hate scaling Orochimaru in versus battle videos. I told this to Loco like a couple days ago, bro. Like I hate doing versus battle videos that involve Orochimaru just because, like he said, like the man can't die. Like, well, how are you supposed to kill him? I don't understand. You know, it's like I get it. Like, you know, certain people like have ways of beating quote unquote Orochimaru. Itachi is a perfect example. Yes, he beat Orochimaru with Genjutsu, but it's like, what are you gonna do? How is he supposed to die? Because it seems like Orochimaru just somehow is able to keep living. I know maybe I'm like overthinking it a little bit. Just Orochimaru seems like I have a contingency for everything, you know, that can, you know, befall him. Like we thought he was done in Mid Shippuden, yet here he is in the war arc because he had a curse mark on somebody. So like the point is, like, as long as he has a curse mark on somebody, he's still technically alive. They just have to know how to, you know, unseal him, I guess. But the I guess the you know, if I'm getting off the rabbit trail that I'm going on here, yeah, like you said, like the Kusanagi sword, like it wasn't able to penetrate, you know, the Four Tails, and you know Chidori, who is like is a tank of a sword in itself, barely pierced the Raikage's lightning armor.
And that was his version 1 cloak. He wasn't even at full power in that instance. Like the Raikage was not going all out. So assume like we're operating under the assumption that that's not even like his full power lightning cloak, to be honest.
Yeah, so like that was, even the Raikage was like, I'm surprised you even got this far in my lightning cloak armor. So yeah, I don't think Orochimaru can necessarily do much to the Raikage, again because I don't think Orochimaru is necessarily used to dealing with opponents as fast as him. And so, I mean, what's he going to be able to do? I mean, like I said, like Edo Tensei would probably be the surefire way that he could win. And if we are using the ones that we saw, you know, the Hashirama and the Tobirama that we saw in the Konoha Crush arc, then honestly, like, we really couldn't give Flying Raijin to the Tobirama because he didn't even use it in that fight.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not trying to be that guy, you know, per se. Like, I'm not trying to take it away from him because he does still have that ability. But I don't know. Me personally, I feel like the Raikage may not necessarily get the kill, quote unquote, on Orochimaru, but conversely, I don't really see necessarily a way that Orochimaru can land a decisive blow on the Raikage at the same time. So, yeah, I don't want to say this is like a back and forth. I am personally out of ideas of how this fight could go. So, Loco, unfortunately this one's kind of on you and see what you think. Because again, like Orochimaru does have a summon, but
Yeah.
I mean that'd probably be his best bet, I guess.
I actually have like a slightly different interpretation. During Orochimaru's fight with the Four Tails, he looks at Naruto forming up a tiny little Bijou bomb, and he says contact with chakra so dense could kill even me. So Orochimaru is admitting that this version 2 little baby Jinchuriki forming a tiny little Bijou bomb would be able to kill Orochimaru. And of course he does survive it by summoning in the Rashomon gates, and he does kind of tank the attack because it breaks through the Rashomon, of course. But it's still like Orochimaru, who is pretty prideful, saying something like this is just very, very telling. And once again, we've already scaled the Raikage to actual full Bijou levels, and possibly even perfect Jinchuriki levels if he scales above B. So, of course, unless you like the Raikage can, I've said before in this video that the Raikage scaling above B means that he'd be able to output the same amount of attack potency that B's tailed beast bombs would have. So if you have that interpretation, then yes, the Raikage would probably kill Orochimaru if he's dicking around too much. Like if Orochimaru is playing around and is not actually taking the fight serious, then the Raikage is probably going to slam him, you know, just based off this statement. But that's probably not what Orochimaru is going to do. He's probably going to take this a lot more seriously and go into his higher forms. First things first, if you want to give him the Edo Tensei, the Raikage can do absolutely nothing about it. He has no ceiling jutsus confirmed, so the Edo Tensei will eventually win against the Raikage, but that's kind of boring. Let's talk about Orochimaru's actual win cons, you know? His best thing that he has in his arsenal is the 8-headed Hydra Serpent, and it actually has some crazy statements about it. It's just stated to be bigger and larger than Manda, and it's stated to actually surpass Orochimaru himself. Now, you can interpret this in numerous amount of ways, but I'd say when it says it surpasses Orochimaru himself, it means that it's stronger than he is. So if Orochimaru is already scaling to like Hiruzen and the Raikage, like overall, not in terms of speed obviously, then the 8-headed Hydra would just be stronger than that. So I'd say the 8-headed Hydra would just win based off of that, but he also has the Great White Serpent that he uses for his transformation ritual thing, that when he tries to take over people's bodies. And the reason why this is relevant is when the blood of the Great White Serpent is exposed to the air, it turns into poison, and it actually paralyzes like literally everyone nearby. So if the Raikage cuts up the Great White Serpent, then he's gonna get paralyzed, and then from there Orochimaru can do whatever he wants with him. He can get a little bit freaky, you know. But basically Orochimaru cannot win against the Raikage unless he pulls out his most powerful jutsu. If you guys have been paying attention, this is a theme that we've been going along with so far. Jiraiya and Orochimaru cannot win. They have no hope of winning against this guy unless they use their strongest jutsu in their arsenal, which I think that's a pretty good look for the Raikage. It's kind of up to your own interpretation of whether or not the Great White Serpent would actually be able to take him down, but I think it has some pretty good scaling for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, now that we think about it, let's say, you know, the Orochimaru has Manda, the 8-headed serpent, and then the Edo Tensei. If we added the Edo Tensei into this, if we didn't, then I mean, I don't know. I think when it comes down to it, for me, I think Orochimaru has the better chances of survivability because of his versatility. It's just that, again, it's just really tough to catch the Raikage, even with all that we've said. And I don't want it to be that guy that just talks about a person's speed, but again, like going back to the Minato thing, that's part of what made Minato so dangerous, is his speed. I mean, let's be honest here, that was what gave Minato the flee on sight order in the third grade Ninja War. So like, speed is no joke in this series, man. Like, so I don't know. It's one of those things where like it could play out the same way as Jiraiya, where the Raikage may be able to blitz Orochimaru before he even gets a jutsu off, but Orochimaru does still have ways of being durable enough to maybe tank it, at least as far as surviving an attack because of his substitutions and whatnot. So I don't know. Personally, to me, this one could go either way. if I had to lean on somebody in this fight, I'd probably go Orochimaru, like a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I definitely would lean towards Orochimaru. I think he is durable enough to tank the Raikage's weaker attacks, and he has a few more win cons that I previously outlined. So I would lean towards Orochimaru in this matchup. If you think that the Raikage wins, definitely I understand where you're coming from. Once again, it is an extremely close fight. Orochimaru is just one crazy dude with a bunch of crazy jutsu, so I think that he would eventually edge this one out. So moving on to Tsunade, this one is actually kind of outlined in the series already. Madara does make the statement when he's fighting against the 5 Kage that Tsunade is slower than the Raikage, but her power is far greater. Now, I want to make it very clear that that statement only refers to Tsunade when she has her 100 healings active, or her creation rebirth. And you may ask, why is this relevant? Like, all that the 100 healings that Byakugo Seal does is just like regen basically, but it's actually not just regen. It's whenever she activates the creation rebirth, it's stated to actually make her stronger. She's more powerful whenever she has the Byakugo Seal active. So that statement that Madara makes cannot be used to scale base Tsunade. So I'm not saying that base Tsunade is weaker than the Raikage physically, but basically you could make the assertion that she needs the Byakugo Seal in order to be stronger than the Raikage, is what I'm trying to get down to here.
Yeah, there's also this, and again, it's up to interpretation of what you feel like is right, I suppose. There's also a filler episode where the Raikage and Tsunade are having this like little arm wrestling match, and Tsunade kind of just not folds him, like, but she does win. So you can interpret things how you like. I get what Logo's saying, like that Byakugo does amp her strength, so again, like with the whole Minato speed thing, like I said earlier, now that the Raikage's a bit older, he's had time to train, like who knows, he might actually be on the same level as Tsunade without the Byakugo, which I mean, I wouldn't necessarily knock that theory, just because we seeing how strong the Raikage is. I mean, he broke through Sasuke's Susanoo like it was nothing. So and it's kind of similar thing to what Tsunade was doing in the War Arc. Now, I'm not comparing 5 Kage Summit Susanoo to modern Susanoo, but the point still stands, is like, the Raikage broke through it like it was nothing, and Tsunade was doing some pretty decent damage to modern Susanoo. So like their strength is definitely relative one way or the other, so I could definitely see that.
I think me and Lightning would agree that, like, even if Tsunade lands a hit on the Raikage, it's not like that one hit is not going to kill him. She's going to have to like consecutively like pummel him in order to like have a chance of like breaking through the lightning cloak and then like inevitably killing him. But the thing about this fight is that they kind of have like a similar moveset. It's just like run at something and punch it basically.
Yeah.
But it's the Raikage's just got to be careful about Tsunade and like just her overwhelming strength, because once again we've outlined that Tsunade probably won't be able to do much against the Raikage without her Byakugo Seal active. First of all, because I think you're gonna be hard pressed if you want to claim that Tsunade is not going to sustain any damage in this fight if she's just in base. Like, she's going to take some damage from the Raikage, which is why she's going to need the Byakugo Seal active. She'll also need the extra strength buff that she gets from that. So I think we can just take the possibility of base Tsunade winning like off the table here. Like, the Raikage is crazy strong, and he has insanely, like, he's great scaling. Like, we've already talked about the Bijou scaling on end here. So in order to have any hope of surviving that, she is going to need that regen active. And I think Tsunade's best feat of like directly tanking something and getting back up from it is like kind of not being affected by Madara's Yasuka Magatama beads. She kind of just tanks that shit point blank, which is an insanely impressive durability feat for her, don't get me wrong, but like, you don't really know where those Yasuka Magatamas scale. And of course Madara could be holding back at the same time, because it's made very clear that he's not trying throughout that fight, and those beads really have no other scaling, if I'm being totally honest, other than the fact that Madara was the one that created them. But unless you think that they're stronger than a fucking Bijou bomb, I don't see why that would be totally relevant here. But I since their moveset is so similar, the Raikage is going to be heavily relying on his speed here. And I think that the Lariat is his best chance of winning this fight, basically, of surviving against Tsunade. I hinted that I would bring it up earlier. Like, whenever B or the Raikage use the Lariat, they move at the like close to the speed of light. It's blatantly stated in the data books. But the question is, do they travel faster with the Lariat than they normally do? So, like, are the Raikage and B always traveling at relativistic speeds, or do they amp themselves with their chakra in preparation for the Lariat? I have been looking for a way to prove this all day, and I have had no luck. So it kind of comes up to your own interpretation if you think that the Lariat is actually faster than their normal physical movement speed. But if it is, I don't see how you'd have any way of proving that Tsunade would be able to react to it. And we already know how strong the Lariat is. I mentioned how B was able to like take out Sasuke's entire chest, and of course, like, this is when B and the Raikage combined are doing it, but they can like chop off people's heads. Like, they're insanely strong when it comes to the Lariat. So I definitely think that the Lariat would be something that could take Tsunade down, as long as it's faster than his normal physical movement. Because if it's faster, then that's something that Tsunade and the rest of the Sannin, by extension, may not be able to react to.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that Taka Sasuke feed up, because I mean that's exactly what would happen. And the thing is, like, I could see the Raikage holding off Lariat until he notices that her 100 healings is worn off, because that would be the only way really that she'd be able to like survive the Lariat, you know. Because I mean, after that fight with Madara, like, as soon as she was cut in half, she was done for. Like, she was still alive, yeah, but she was KO'd. There was nothing else she could have done. And so, I mean, if the Raikage is able to survive, you know, long enough for the 100 healings to wear off, hits her with Lariat, it's pretty much done for her. Like, her chest is gonna be ripped open, or best case in the Raikage's favor, he just cuts her in half like Madara did, or cuts her head off or whatever. So yeah, and like I've been saying, like, none of the Sannin are really used to fighting people this fast. So to say that should be able to react to the Raikage, no, sorry, it's not happening. So, but and again, if Tsunade does get a lucky shot in, like maybe the Raikage slips up on a stone or something, like, in all honesty, man, like, I'm being serious, like, if the Raikage slips up one time, like, there's a good chance that, you know, one hit from Tsunade might be able to catch him off guard, you know, because Tsunade's punches are no joke. So I don't want to be sleeping on Tsunade, but yeah, I think Raikage has a better chance of survivability in this round.
And I know some people might be saying, like, she has 100 healings, like, she'd just be able to reach. No, she's not regenerating from this. It's actually stated in the data books that she cannot regen, like, serious wounds. And I'd say getting your head chopped off or your chest just exploded is a pretty serious wound. So it's not like she can just automatically regenerate from literally any attack. That's just never shown. It's just more like minor wounds, like cuts and bruises and lacerations, stuff like that. But she's not regenerating organs or an extra half of her body or brain cells after the Raikage crushes her head with the Liger bomb. So
Yeah.
the Raikage, if he goes for any of his like more hardcore moves, like dropping Tsunade on her head or using the lariats, or really anything that just causes like a serious injury, like sometimes the Raikage does like weak little attacks, like he like bitch slaps Sasuke through his Susanoo, like he wasn't being totally serious there, like he should have killed Sasuke. Like, if he knew that he could break the Susanoo, like he should have fucking done it. I don't know why he just opted to do that. But he actually has like varying degrees of like strength, like the guillotine drop that actually might just slam Tsunade. Like he's going all kinds of like sumo wrestling moves, like on some WWE shit, and that would be enough to put her out of commission for good, basically, since the creation rebirth won't be able to save her from serious injuries like that. So me personally, I would say that this leans in favor of the Raikage, since he is faster. Tsunade is going to have an extremely hard time hitting him. Katsuyu won't really be enough here, since we've already established that the Sannin summons actually do scale below the Sannin. And Tsunade just really doesn't have any other tricks up her sleeve like Orochimaru and Jiraiya does that could save her here. So I definitely am leaning towards the Raikage. Like Lightning so said, if Tsunade can get in like a really lucky shot or several, then by all means, like she could definitely take down the Raikage since she's stated to be more powerful than he is. Really, the Raikage speed, once again, we've been talking about it through this entire video ad nauseum. It is just overwhelming for the Sannin.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound redundant about the whole speed stuff, but again, I just if you really want a reference point, again, the whole speed thing is really what made, you know, Minato have a flee on sight order. I don't think the Raikage is no joke. I don't think he's definitely someone that, like, me personally, could at least go toe to toe with the Sannin, if not outright beat them. So personally, yeah, I think the only one that actually wins this definitively is Orochimaru.
Yeah, in conclusion, Jiraiya and Tsunade really just don't cut it. Jiraiya is going to have a hard time getting into his final form and having an even harder time setting up his strongest attack, and Tsunade just doesn't have the versatility like the other two Sannin. So I definitely think that they would most likely lose to the Raikage, and Orochimaru would just barely make it out if he pulls out his strongest jutsu. If you disagree with any of these conclusions, I'm totally fine with that, as long as you recognize that the Sannin just aren't going to be slamming the Raikage in base. That's the moral of this story, right? If you think that they can win, I'm fine with that, as long as you realize that they need to go all out to take this guy down. The Raikage is heavily underrated, and you really just need to understand that he can't be slept on. They do need the Sage Mode, they do need the 8-headed Hydra, they do need the Creation Rebirth to take this guy down, because he's such a crazy tank, just coupled with his incredible speed.
Definitely, 100%. I'm glad. I don't talk about the Raikage a whole lot, and I may have been guilty of sleeping on him, not in the conventional sense, but I definitely don't talk about him as much as I probably should. So I was glad to hop on this one to actually give him some love and show him that he's tough. He's nothing to scoff at.
Of course, leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below if you agreed or disagreed. Thank you to Lightning Snow for coming on. Just once again, it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
And yeah, go check out his channel. Like, he makes a bunch of great videos. But I think we're gonna head out. I'm gonna catch y'all later. Peace.